is just adjust your posture. And while adjusting your posture, also recognize that your body has stopped moving as much as it usually does. Recognize where you are physically. Notice that all of these are indicators that you have entered into this practice. And this is a sacred space that you have gifted to yourself. A space, and this of course it includes myself, a space to step outside of all of the stories that we carry within our minds. Work, family, friends, pets, finances, health. When I ring the bell, the only thing that we will focus on is about being here on our chairs or our cushions. And let's just also remind ourselves, because very often when we have these sessions, I get messages that the practice was wonderful or nice. We want to move beyond that. Because we want to be aware when we're having a good practice. We also want to be aware when we're having what we would consider to be a bad practice. It's the awareness that we would like to anchor ourselves to. And the awareness exists only in the present moment. Every time you find yourself in the past or the future, you know that you are seeing through the eyes of the mind, which creates time and exists only in time. Throughout today's practice, we're going to invite the mind to join us in the present moment. Which is where my voice will guide you towards different practices, different sensations, different aspects of the present moment. And gently, not immediately, but gently and gradually, the mind will begin to join us. So don't be in too much of a hurry, because even when you're thinking, you want to be aware of the thinking process. a nice metaphor that I used yesterday at the temple, which I know you've heard before, is how the mind with its thoughts are like the clouds that continuously flow through our experience. Sometimes the clouds are so thick that they block the light shining on the other side. They prevent the light from reaching us here. So caught up in thoughts, worries, concerns, anxieties, the busyness of life. As we practice, we will stop moving with the clouds. Can you imagine what it would be like to follow the clouds? It would be like moving around with an umbrella, constantly moving around under the shade, preventing that light from reaching us. As we tap into the present moment, as we anchor ourselves into the present moment, we will begin to still ourselves, stop, while the thoughts, while the clouds, they continue to move. And if you've ever seen a cloud formation, there's always an end. And while you are thinking, be aware of the thought process. Watch the clouds moving, knowing that this too, referring to whatever you may be going through in your life right now, this too will pass. And soon the clouds, they begin to turn from dark gray into light gray, and from light gray into those white, fluffy, almost transparent balls of cotton wool floating in the sky. And then finally the light begins to shine through, initially in between the gaps. And at some point, through clear skies, constant stillness, kindness, warmth, beauty, ease. Let this light that you visualize reach your scalp. We're going to arrive, which simply means releasing our bodies to the forces of gravity, allowing gravity to bring us more fully and more completely into the present moment. Our scalps with the hair follicles easing, relaxing, loosening, resting upon the bone that is our skull with a thin layer of muscle that begins to loosen. This light of awareness gravitating downwards through the facial muscles, the ears, the lips, just finding ease, almost returning back to an expression that does not need to be defined. Now let this light of awareness move through the bone, through the skull, into that area where the brain is, where the eyes sit, and the ears. And as the light moves into and through the nostrils and the nose, aware of the breathing process that unfolds from breath to breath and moment to moment. But still, please do be aware of the clouds, the occasional clouds that seem to cover up and block the light. Because that is the nature of the mind. It is the nature of the mind to think, to react against the doorbell that rings, the footsteps in the apartment above you, the car alarm or the honking outside your window. Each one of these bringing out a cloud, a thought, a response, a judgment, a like, a dislike. Take a deep, deep, deep breath. For this present moment, you are no longer even reliant on the light. For this present moment, this consciousness, this awareness. They exist within the gaps in between the clouds. It is the space underneath the clouds, that vastness, that infinite vastness, that infinite kindness beyond boundaries that makes up the space between the clouds and the mountains, the space between the clouds and the deepest valleys, the space that bathes every inch of our bodies and every inch of the oceans and the rivers and the lakes and the continents. Perhaps the reason why we still have not found limits to the ways in which we express our kindness and our love. It is the space above the clouds that reaches up and around the moon, the space above the clouds that reaches the planets around us and our sun and the countless stars that make up this universe, the galaxies. Glance back at the clouds. They're still there. The clouds are still there, but they appear like specks of dust with different patterns, not as relevant as they once appeared to be. Some taking the form of our loved ones, finances, health, and everything else that makes up the stories that we so often identify with. A ringing of a bell to bring us back into this awareness, this space. This isness that we find ourselves resting in. But it is a rest far different from sleep, for we are alert, we are awake, perhaps more awake than ever before, awake to the sounds and the sensations and the smells and the tastes, even to the shadows that reach us through our eyelids. This present moment Let the clouds move. But notice we are no longer held back by the clouds. We are no longer dependent on the clouds for this awareness, for we have shifted our identification from the clouds to this space. This space infused with awareness and consciousness that now makes its way through our jaw bones. Release an intention to relax your jaws, to loosen your jaw bones, to let your mouth fall, the teeth no longer touching, the lower and the upper jaw no longer in contact, just relaxed, at ease. This awareness relaxing and spreading through the neck, where you can experience the swallowing process along with the breathing process, along with the spinal column, the top end of the spinal column that keeps your head held up. Follow your spinal column all the way down to its tail, resting upon your pelvic bone. And with the next bell, turn your posture into one of balance more than effort. Continuing to breathe in. Of course, you're always breathing, but just being aware of your breath. Perhaps using each breath to bring you that little bit closer to the present moment. And this bell, this next bell, surrendering the effort within the muscles of the arms and the shoulders and the chest and the back. Just noticing the magical way in which your body simply balances itself. The vertebrae of the spine, one stacked on top of the next. This awareness moving through the stomach and the lower back, and into the pelvic region, and then into the legs, both right and left. reaching the knees and aware of the bend, the shell, the outer shell, the muscles within the knee that can now relax and let go. Calves, ankles, feet, all the way from the heel and the soles of the feet right down to the tips of the toes. If you are on a chair, then the contact between the soles of your feet and the flooring or the carpet underneath you. Notice what it truly means to have arrived into this sacred space, this gift, this moment, this here, this now, moving beyond the mind, having moved beyond the mind, thus recognizing how the present moment can only be sacred. For it is the only moment outside of time, before time began, before space began. What does it feel like to you? You don't need to define it. You do not need to give it any meaning. For definitions and meanings can only come from the mind, from the clouds, and how limited the clouds are in relation, relative to this spaciousness, this kindness, this wisdom. Now visualize. If you can visualize the sound waves emanating from this bell, just like the ripples that move through a quiet and still pond. Each ripple, each sound wave reaching your face and your chests and your stomachs and the whole front of your body. And because our bodies appear to be solid, we sometimes believe that these sound waves can only bounce off them. But let us remind ourselves how these forms, these bodies that we now inhabit temporarily, are simply made up of atoms and molecules that make up the cells and the skin and the organs and the bones. Atoms and molecules constantly moving, constantly changing with space, vast amounts of space in between these forms that we inhabit. More than 99.9% pure space. Let the ringing of the next bell, let its sound waves, let its ripples move in between these atoms, in between these molecules. From this point onwards, every bell, every ringing of the bell leading to a form that begins to fade, its edges becoming fuzzy, so that these sound waves, these ripples, simply move through our bodies, our forms, as though they were transparent, which they are. Releasing an intention, because each and every one of us here, there are still little pockets of tightness, of stress, where we've been holding on to certain memories, challenges, people we've been unable to forgive. We're not going to attempt to forgive anyone or change the past. We're simply going to invite these sound waves to loosen these knots a little bit more. A consequence being the rising of the immune system, which up until now functions well in certain parts of the body, but not all. As we release these pockets, this tightness, this stress, this worry, the cells begin to return back into balance. The immune system rising, rising, rising like a balloon that has been held underwater for a very, very long time, unnaturally. Stop holding on to the balloon. Just watch it rise as you release, as you let go, as you allow yourself, your true self, to be experienced on a very practical note in the present moment. The past does not exist. And so there is nothing to forgive. The future does not exist, and so there is nothing left to say or do other than to be here now. The next ringing of the bell, a complete and total dissolving of this form we call our bodies, blending into the space around us, hugging the walls and the ceilings and the paintings and the art and the corners and the dust particles. In a space of being, in a space of presence. Devoid of the past, devoid of the future. There is no distinction between good or bad, beauty or its opposite. We embrace and be embraced by all that is. Whatever judgments you've ever formed about yourself, whatever names you were called, labels you were given, dissolving, dissolved, gone, just like the knots. Touched by these sound waves, these ripples that simply untie, undo, and then move through. Let us move through the walls of these rooms within which we rest and practice. For these walls too are made up of atoms and molecules with vast amounts of space in between them, which allow us to move into the streets, moving through every leaf, every tree, every pebble, every grain of sand, every wall, every person, animal, bird, and whatever other life forms there are that surround us. Let us adopt an intention that all forms of consciousness, animate and inanimate, which means from the grain of sand and the blade of grass to the birds and the animals and the people, all consciousness touched by this awareness, share in all that we are experiencing, this contentment, this kindness, this ease, this knowing that it's all okay, always okay, always working out. Moving through the lands and the seas and the oceans, reaching every continent, moving underneath the surfaces of the seas and the oceans and the lakes and the waters, and even beneath the base, reaching, bathing this whole planet, which the ancients believed to be alive. Conscious, this great rock of awareness that has fed us, sheltered us, supported us. We share this appreciation that we feel within every cell, and now within every thought, every cloud, every belief. Let the slightly wider gaps in between my words allow you to bask and bathe in this silence. Towards which every sound and every word directs you, towards for it is here. It is now. With the ringing of the next bell, see if you can find your breath once again. Which of course refers to the sensations. Recognize how the breath unfolds in the present moment. Either an in-breath or an out-breath. Simply identifying the sensations that seem to indicate that it must be an in-breath. Things like direction, temperature, humidity levels, perhaps even the smells. And the out-breath. And perhaps today shining the spotlight on that gap in between the breath in and the breath out. That pause in between the breath out and the next breath in. Where nothing happens, where it's just quiet. Spending one moment there in the gap. spending another moment in the gap, letting go of whatever fragments remain of the past, of the future that has most probably been manufactured by someone or some institution that you have placed great importance upon in your life. Just letting go of all molds, frames, projection. And as you breathe in all that you experienced within the gap. Breathing in this emptiness, this quietness, stillness, this kindness. But it's not the usual kindness we define with our mind. It is that connectedness that we have experienced as we bathed the grains of sand with awareness, the grass and the leaves, the birds and the squirrels, and those other living forms. No longer other, just one presence, one awareness. Experiencing the abundance, releasing all of those definitions that we once held as to what abundance was. The abundance of air, the abundance of good health, which allows us to participate in this practice together in this way. the abundance of kindness through the animals and people that have passed and continue to pass through our lives. The abundance and all the access that we have to the art forms that we enjoy, that we are passionate about. And whatever else or however else you would like to define abundance. But can you recognize how it is all already here now? We let our forms completely dissolve, becoming one with this abundance. Recognizing our true form to be beyond boundaries, beyond limits, and therefore the very essence of abundance. And as we hear the final bell in this short practice that we have had together, let us turn this day into a practice of simply recognizing this abundance within everything we may consume as food, with every breath that we may take in, with every sight that enters into our experience as the sense of sight, every sound, every physical sensation, and on from breath to breath, moment to moment. We end with 3 intentions. Let there be peace. Within this manifested world of matter. Let all beings, all animate and inanimate objects where there is consciousness experience peace. The second intention, let there be peace within every mind. And finally, peace itself. That we experience this peace more completely with every breath, every step, every movement, every bite. Thank you, my beautiful friends. Really appreciate it. Take care, my dear friends. I shall see you very soon. Take care. Love to you both. Thank you.